former Tampa teacher who pleaded guilty to having sex with her 14-year-old student in 2005.
The former Greco middle school teacher pleaded guilty to having sex with the student in 2005.
Lafave, who admitted to having sex with an underage student.
You all recall Debra Lafave, convicted of raping a 14-year-old student.
Her name was Debra Lafave, and she's one in a string of young female teachers who've admitted having sex with underage male students. In 2004, Debra Beasley Lafave was arrested at the home of a middle school student, accused of having sex with him at her apartment, in her car, in her classroom. She was 23. He was 14.
14-year-old boy, a very attractive 23-year-old teacher. He's had sex with you. Weren't you scared to death he would tell someone?
Obviously not, because I did it again.
And again.
And again.
In May 2004, a 14-year-old boy went to his aunt's house to meet up with his cousin, who lived in Ocala. The aunt noticed something odd. The boy was accompanied by a provocatively dressed woman who seemed way older than him. The aunt alerted his mother, and later that evening, under intense questioning from the mother, the boy admitted that the woman was his English teacher. One thing led to another, and police arrested the teacher after a sting operation. However, who's the teacher? How did this happen? And most importantly, knowing how things tend to go, did she actually face any real consequences? In 1998, Debra Jean Williams graduated from Bloomingdale High School and attended the University of South Florida, graduating with a degree in English. Around 2002, she was hired as an English teacher at Greco Middle School in Temple Teresa, Florida. Following her first year of teaching, she married Owen Lafave.
Debra majored in English at the University of South Florida with the goal of becoming a teacher. She stopped her heavy drinking, got into a steady relationship, maintained a high B average. In 2002, despite all her troubles, Debra graduated from college and took a job as an 8th grade reading teacher at Greco Middle School in Temple Terrace, a suburb of Tampa. By all accounts, her first year went well.
Debra Lafave was known for her sharp sense of humor and her looks. The 24-year-old English teacher knew everyone by name and often had kids hanging out in her classroom after school. However, everything changed in May 2004 when Debra accompanied a 14-year-old student to see his cousin. The cousin's mother was alarmed to see him accompanied by a provocatively dressed woman who seemed way older than him and called his mother. Later in the evening, under intense questioning from the mother, the boy admitted that the woman was his English teacher. The mother was shocked because she knew the teacher and even had her cell phone number. What's worse is that the teacher called her that very evening, offering a false excuse as to why the boy had been with her. The police soon got involved, and the boy told officers that he had sex with Debra 3 times in 4 days. He also claimed that she performed oral sex on him several times. Even more disturbing, one of the sexual encounters took place in a car, while the boy's 15-year-old cousin drove him and Debra around the neighborhood. The police decided that the sting operation would be the best route to get evidence against her, so they encouraged the 14-year-old boy to assist them. In a call between the two, the boy urged Debra to say that she had enjoyed their most recent encounter, and she apparently adopted the voice of a flirty little girl to assure him she had. She then asked him if he wanted to continue. He agrees but sounds uncertain. He expressed concerns and they end the conversation. Police realized that what she said was not sufficient to implicate her in sexual activity, so they wanted another such call. That same day, the boy called her back. He directly states the fact that they have had sex 3 times, citing his concern about their lack of protection. She sidesteps the issue, assuring him that he should not be concerned. She clearly doesn't expect a setup and does not deny what he said. Still, it was not enough. They tried again over the weekend. The boy was uncomfortable with the whole thing, but he had no choice but to cooperate. He told police intimate details about his teacher's body, with which they could compare to the real thing. In the event she denied anything or said it was all a game. If it were a game, he would not know these things. Even if this approach did not prove outright sexual contact, it would at least prove the corruption of a minor. Fortunately, the woman had distinct tattoos and shave lines. On the next call, the boy invited his teacher to meet him in secret, and she accepted. She said, "You wouldn't lie to me, would you?" As if she suspected something would happen. He assured her he would not, then kept on telling her he wants to see her and insisted his mother will be working. He won't have a ride, so she'll need to pick him up. After recording the phone conversation, which was enough evidence, she did not even have the chance to see him, as the officer stopped her SUV in front of the house and arrested her. From within the house, the boy confirmed her identity, and she was on her way to the police department.
Debra had been spotted by the mother of one of the cousin's friends. She, in turn, told the cousin's mom.
The cousin's mom calls the student's mom and says, this teacher, this beautiful teacher, is hanging out with your son.
Mm-hmm.
When did you find out that you'd been spotted up there and that these phone calls had occurred?
That day.
And what'd you do about it?
Nothing.
She also called the boy's mother to smooth things over.
I was more thinking of it as being a young girl who just got caught with her boyfriend, and we shouldn't piss our parents off.
It's okay.
I didn't mean to say that.
But Debra didn't know that the boy's mother had already confronted him. He'd told her about the sex. She'd called the police. Soon, detectives questioned the boy, confirmed his story, and had him call Debra while they listened in.
You enjoyed yourself yesterday.
I did. Did you?
Yeah.
So it's not over?
Yeah,
Oh my God. Why couldn't you just said go? Not yet. That kind of sucked.
You know, clearly, to me, that sounds very childish. It's not over. I mean, that's not something that an adult would say.
Do you remember making those calls?
Yeah.
The detectives had the boy call Debra again, this time to invite her to his house. She made him promise his mom wasn't home.
Positive.
Yeah.
Promise?
Yeah.
Pinky promise. Say pinky promise.
Yeah.
Alright.
When Debra arrived at the appointed time on June 21st, 2004, the police were waiting. She claims that even then, she was still oblivious to the idea that she'd committed a crime.
It took about maybe 5 seconds, and my car was surrounded. And at first, my immediate thought was, did I just run a stop sign?
Her husband at the time, Lafave, who said he'd stand by her but divorced her shortly after, later wrote a book, Gorgeous Disaster, in which he described just how the police trapped her, blames her action on her parents, and supposed trauma she faced around the same age as her victim. It should be noted that less than a year after their wedding, she was accused of having sex with a 14-year-old boy. Also, some people blamed the boy, and to those I think I need to explain that even if the boy initiated contact or flirted with her, it was her responsibility as a teacher that people entrust with their children to know the boundaries between herself and the students, and as the adult, she was supposed to be the mature one and stop it right then and there.
There are some people out there who say this is every 14-year-old boy's fantasy. Did you hear that?
Yeah. I just think it's stupid. I can't even think of any other word to describe it. I think it's ridiculous. He consented, but I should have been the one to say, look, you are a kid, and that this is not a good idea, whether you want it or not.
You should have said it on a number of occasions.
Oh, yeah.
You should have said it when you first started flirting with him.
Yeah.
And you clearly should have said it before you had sex with this young man.
Since we know how the arrest was made, it's only logical to ask about the details of the relationship, and it goes as follows. In April, Debra attended tag football games where the boy played, and he and a friend introduced themselves to her. In May, several teachers had taken a busload of students to the Universal Studio amusement park in Orlando. Also on this trip was the boy. Debra bought some candy, apparently for him and his friends from the team, ironically fitting the stereotype of a pedophile luring children with candy. The boy later indicated that this gesture inspired him to start going to Debra's classroom even though he was not her student. Then the boy started calling the teacher on her cell phone. She accepted the calls. She even wrote a note to request that the boy be allowed to spend a certain period during the final days of the school semester in her classroom. In fact, during these times, she was alone in her classroom with him and a few of his friends. Also during this period, she allowed him to become more physically familiar with her, even in front of other students. Debra offered the boy a ride after school to get his haircut, and soon she was taking him to his games. On the last day of school, Debra put the boy in detention as a way to get him alone with her in her portable classroom. 2 other boys were invited to help her pack up her items in preparation for the summer, but they left when the day was half over. At this point, Debra lifted her shirt, showing part of her bra to the boy, and exchanged kisses. In early June, the boy went to Ocala to spend the week with his cousin. He stayed in touch with Debra by cell phone, but she was apparently dissatisfied with his long-distance arrangement. By midweek, she drove there, picked up both boys, and took them back to her home. There, while the cousin watched a movie, she took the boy into her bedroom and performed oral sex on him. She then admitted to his cousin that she had done so. On the trip back to Ocala, Debra went even further. She turned the car over to the cousin in possession of just a learner's permit, and she performed oral sex on the boy. Those who know Debra commented that over the past several months, she transformed into a 14-year-old girl. She was skinnier than ever, wore clothes like the kids she taught, and even pulled her blonde hair into a pigtail. She apparently wanted to seem to the boy more like a girlfriend. On June 14, 2004, Debra picked up the boy so they could spend some time together. They went to her former classroom 2 weeks after the semester had ended. The classroom had a blacked-out window. There she engaged in sexual intercourse with the boy. The next offense again took place while the cousin illegally drove the car, and this time using the rear-view mirror. He was able to watch them engage in intercourse. Yet after their third session, the boy said he wanted to take a break. This surprised Debra. Apparently she was in her own fantasy and didn't expect that the boy was getting uncomfortable.
Debra Lafave, a 23-year-old reading teacher, was having an affair with a 14-year-old student at her middle school in a suburb of Tampa. She'd already performed oral sex on him. Now 10 days later, June 14th, she invited him to help her clean her classroom and crossed yet another line.
And that was the first time.
You had intercourse with him at school?
Yes.
School was out, and Debra grew even more reckless. The next day, she drove the student to Ocala, 100 miles north, to visit his 15-year-old cousin. They picked up the cousin at his home. Debra gave him the car keys. Then she climbed in back and had sex with the 14-year-old.
You had sex with this student while his cousin drove the car. You know, even if he's not 14 and you're 23, even if he's not your student and you're a married woman, it's a pretty brazen thing to do. Were you scared?
It didn't even bother me. And like I said, I am the most modest person even today. Like, if I'm in my bathing suit, I want a cover-up.
It seems like there are a lot of contradictions here.
Oh,
because
there is.
On the one hand, you're saying you're a modest person, yet you've had sex in a car with a 14-year-old while his cousin's driving.
2 days later, June 17th, she and the boy again drove to Ocala and picked up the cousin. They all went to a park. While the cousin made a phone call, Debra and the boy again had sex in the back of Debra's SUV.
How did you explain yourself when you would show up in Ocala? Here's a place 100 miles from where you live. How would you explain why you were there?
Nobody really, I mean, all of his friends that were out there were, you know, high-fiving him and saying, oh yeah, she is hot, blah, blah, blah. You know, so there was really no one that I saw. I didn't know anybody.
But those friends are going home and telling their friends, hey, this young man in question is being visited by his, in your word, hot teacher. At any point during sex with this student or after sex with this student, did you say, in the eyes of the law, I just committed rape?
No. I don't think no, I didn't say that.
After the arrest, 2 separate sets of charges were filed because the alleged incident occurred in both Riverview in Hillsborough County and Ocala in Marion County. A trial date was set after the prosecution and defense could not agree on a plea bargain that involved prison time. However, shortly before the trial was scheduled to begin, Debra pleaded guilty to 2 counts of lewd and lascivious battery, and in the plea deal, she was sentenced to 3 years of community control, meaning house arrest, and 7 years of sex offender probation. Prosecution defended the deal, saying that sex offender probation in Florida is quite difficult to complete, and Debra could have gone to jail if she violated any of the probation terms. Also, as part of her plea deal, she was required to surrender her teaching license and was banned from teaching in Florida again. Under the terms of her probation, she had to be home by 10 p.m., could not leave Hillsborough County without a judge's permission, and could not be around children. She also had to register as a sex offender.
Debra Lafave, who you will remember, who was convicted of having sex with a male 14-year-old student in her elementary school, is a registered sex offender. And as part of her house arrest and her probation, she has a long list of don't lists, things she can't do. And among them is she can't have contact unsupervised with the minor. She was working a job at a restaurant where she was in contact with a 17-year-old waitress. And the investigator, who is her probation officer in this case, said that he had uncovered that they had been having conversations unrelated to work. They've been talking about boyfriends, school, and talking about sex. As a result, he did more of an investigation. They brought that 17-year-old here to court today, who's now 18 years old. However, in the end, that 18-year-old didn't have to testify, and so the judge said, okay, you are in violation, but basically gave her a pass. And there's been a lot of questions from the beginning of this as whether there was a double standard being applied to Debra Lafave's case. Many people had suggested, were she a man and had it been a female student, there absolutely would have been prison time. In this case, she didn't get prison time. And in this case here, the judge decided, well, I'm going to tell you not to do it again, a little slap on the wrist to set you on a correct course, but you're not going to prison.
The nature of her sentencing resulted in a widespread skepticism as to whether a man guilty of load battery would have received equally mild punishment.
You know, you hear some people say she should be in prison. That if the roles were reversed, and if you were a man who was 24 and had sex with a 13 or 14-year-old girl, you'd be in prison. How do you feel about that?
I think I should be in jail.
You think you should be?
Yeah. By the standards, what I did, that's the law. I should have got jail time.
Also, it becomes more apparent if you compare what she got to another Hillsborough school teacher, Ethel Anderson, who was sentenced to 38 years in prison for performing oral sex on a 12-year-old boy.
Once honored as Teacher of the Year, now must serve 38 years in a Florida state prison.
You, Ms. Anderson, are a parent's worst nightmare.
A jury convicted 31-year-old Ethel Anderson of 9 counts of molesting a 12-year-old boy. Anderson tutored him at her home. Our affiliate, Bay News 9, is reporting she said the sexting and touching were all part of a sexual therapy to help the boy deal with problems at school.
You knew he was under the age of 16 when you had this sexual therapy with him. Is that correct?
When the texting occurred, yes.
And while she admits to sending sexual text messages, Anderson says she never actually had sex or any sort of sexual contact with the young boy. She only wanted to help him become a better student.
At the time, with him struggling with school and having behavioral issues and anger issues and acting out at home and not being able to connect with his family the way that he felt and the way his parents felt, that was my purpose, to gain his attention. And yes, I did it in an appropriate way.
Jurors heard from the boy who celebrated his 14th birthday here in this courtroom today. And hearing a recording deputies taped with a wiretap in which Anderson confesses to the boy's mother that she did have a sexual relationship with her son.
Despite what the court might see, I'm not a sexual predator. I don't present a threat to our society. I'm a mother. I'm not a monster. I truly wish that none of this had ever happened, because all I want is to go back to being Isabel's mom. This is not my life. I keep praying that God's plan in all this was to show me who and what I do have so that I appreciate my life more, to show me that my life does have purpose. I shared all this with you, Judge, in the hope that there must be something that you can see in me. There must be something that shows that I'm worthy of mercy.
His mother also spoke to the court through a letter the prosecutor read.
I know that the law will take care of you the way you need to be dealt with. There were many times during this trial I wish I could have gotten up from my seat to scream, yell, or slap you. I feel like I could tear you apart with my bare hands, but those who know me know that I would never do that. I do not know how somebody like you was allowed to be near children. You have turned me into a very angry and cynical mother.
Anderson is married. She has a 6-year-old daughter.
On December 8, 2005, Marion County Circuit Judge rejected the plea deal, claiming that any agreement that did not require Debra to serve some prison time would undermine the credibility of his court and the criminal justice system as a whole, and would erode public confidence in our schools. He set a trial date on it for April 10, 2006. However, The Marion County State Attorney subsequently dropped the charges after an assessment by psychologist Martin Lazoretz found that the victim would be so severely traumatized by a potential trial that it would take as long as 8 years for him to recover.
In November 2005, her lawyer cut a deal with prosecutors in Tampa.
Here comes Lafave.
Deborah would plead guilty to lewd and lascivious battery, but be sentenced to house arrest, no jail time.
I have in my right hand, ma'am, a plea form. Did you talk to your lawyer about it?
Yes, sir.
Do you understand it?
Yes, sir.
Did you sign it?
Yes, sir.
There were still charges pending in Ocala, and the judge there rejected a plea deal, saying her crime demanded she do time. He scheduled a trial. But then, a big surprise.
My lawyer, John, called me and he said, they dropped the charges. I was like, what? They dropped the charges. The state dropped the charges.
The victim's mother had told prosecutors she did not want her son to have to testify, did not want to put a teenage boy under the hot lights that followed Debra Lafave everywhere.
I think ultimately the media intensity was a benefit to us.
Infamy has its privileges.
I called my fiance and I was crying and ecstatic. First I called him crying because they rejected the deal, and then I called him crying because I was so happy. It was just like two extremes. The past 2 years have been hard on all parties involved. I pray with all my heart that the young man and his family will be able to move on with their lives.
Debra's lawyer stated to place Debbie into a Florida State Women's Penitentiary. To place an attractive young woman in that kind of hellhole is like putting a piece of raw meat in with the lions. Susan Goldberg of The Guardian asserted that Debra avoided jail time due to a faulty belief among Americans that she was too pretty for prison. Even her ex-husband Owen criticized the statement.
I want to apologize to the court, to the young man involved, and to his family for my actions. I accept full responsibility for my actions, and I am very sorry for everything which has occurred.
Even though she didn't go to trial, Debra claimed in her defense that she had been abused as a child at nearly the same age as her victim, and added that her father had always been distant and unaffectionate. Back at school, when Debra was 13, she claimed she had been raped by a boy she liked, and he did it repeatedly. When she was a little older, another boy was abusive with her, treating her with disregard. In addition, her ex-husband used the book he wrote to substantiate her claims and add his own explanation to why she is a sex offender. Owen blames Mr. Beasley, her father, for developing a habit of not taking responsibility for her actions. It is a simplistic explanation, and the truth is probably that there were many influences, not the least of which was her striking beauty. She didn't just attract attention from the boys. Back in school, a female classmate also approached her, and they got sexually involved. Apparently they were not discreet. As the secret got out and Debra found herself transferred to another school, she made a half-hearted suicide attempt and suffered from anorexia, an eating disorder. In addition, a drunk driver killed her pregnant sister, and a serious illness threatened her mother's life.
She says to fully understand her, you have to go back years to her childhood in a small town near Tampa, Florida. Her dad worked for the power company. Her mom was a cosmetologist. Debra adored her older sister, Angie.
I loved my big sister. I couldn't go anywhere without her. I loved playing Barbies. I would play school with all my dolls and teach them how to read.
But soon it became apparent that Debbie was a very complicated little girl.
When you were 13 years old, 8th grade, you were raped by someone you knew. Tell me about that.
The first time that it happened was in school. He forced me into a bathroom and began to rape me. And a teacher walked in, and she let us off the hook.
Well, you say she let us off the hook. I mean, what did you do wrong? Why did she have to let you off the hook?
Well, she had no clue that I was being raped. You know, I'm assuming, just thought we were messing around.
Why didn't you say, this boy's raping me?
It just doesn't happen like that. I had a lot of fear. You know, when somebody has that kind of control over you, especially at 13, I didn't tell anybody.
Who was this young man in your life? I mean, was he someone you were close with?
Yeah, he was actually one of my boyfriends. At that point, I had already tried to commit suicide twice, too.
How did you try to commit suicide?
One time was taking a lot of pills, and the second time was slitting my wrists.
Then perhaps the hardest blow of all. In 2001, Debra's beloved older sister Angie was killed by a drunk driver. Debra was devastated, and today she wonders, could her sister have saved her from herself?
I think about if she was here, what I have done, what I did.
Why would it have been different?
Because she knew me well, and she always could tell if I was doing something that I shouldn't be doing.
In a weird twist of events, provocative modeling photographs of Debra have circulated on the internet since she first gained notoriety. The Temple Terrace Police Department came under scrutiny for taking graphic nude photos of Debra while Debra was in jail. She was subjected to examination with numerous photographs taken of her to see if it matches the boy's description. Also, the lead detective who requested the nude photos was arrested before the trial in an unrelated prostitution sting. In 2011, weeks after she gave birth to a premature twin boys, Debra was back in court seeking early release from probation. She had 4 years left on her sentence, but her attorney argued she had completed her required community service and sex offender classes, and she had worked 2 jobs to pay off her $13,000 in court fees. Circuit Judge Timerman appeared to regard Debra as a fellow parent. He joked with her about the demand of newborn twins and remarked that he was a parent of 3 himself. He gave Debra another break, releasing her from probation over the protest of the victims, family, and prosecutors.
5 weeks after giving birth to twin boys, Debra Lafave, now 31 years old, walked into court to ask a judge to end her probation 4 years early. In court, her attorney argued that she has been a model citizen for 6 years and deserves a break.
It's hard to have a life with a family and where you're home every night at 10 o'clock.
The reason she needs to stay on there is because she doesn't like it, doesn't want to do it. It is the punishment she's getting, so she needs to continue to receive that punishment.
State Attorney Mike Sinecor told the judge letting Lafave off early would be a slap in the face to the victim and his family.
The victim was under an intense amount of pressure and a great deal of anxiety about the trial and what that would do to him, and his mom understandably shared that, and they asked us to enter an agreement.
Sinecor says the 14-year-old victim okayed the plea to avoid the publicity of a trial. He also pointed out that the plea stated there would be no early termination of probation, a term the judge decided to ignore.
But if you want to stay involving continuing Ms. Lafave on probation, I'm not going to do it. I've made my ruling. She's off probation. If you want additional time, and I have the authority under the statute that you cited to give it to you, to get your brief, your transcript, all that sort of stuff together, make a good argument to the second district, work with the Attorney General, whatever you're going to do, I'll give it to you. But I'm not going to require her to continue to abide about report to probation and do all the things that probationers do. I've ruled on that, and I'm standing by my ruling.
The state appealed, and in 2013, the Second District Court of Appeals issued a sharply worded ruling calling Timerman's decision an abuse of judicial power resulting in gross miscarriage of justice. After a year of freedom, Debra was put back on probation.
Last year, in a stunning move, a judge took Debra Lafave off probation despite the protests of her victim's family. Today, a judge put her back on probation.
Former teacher Debra Lafave rarely talks to the media, but today she gave us a peek into her private life.
My mom was diagnosed with cancer for the 2nd time, and I spent my year of probation, off probation, taking care of her. And I'm so fortunate that I was able to take her to a chemo treatments and spend the nights with her when she needed me the most. And I appreciate the news people that have spoke on the truth.
Today's decision means Lafave has 4 years and 2 months more to serve on probation. She's ordered to stay away from schools. And the 14-year-old student she pleaded guilty to having sex with.
Her attorney vowed he would take the case to the Supreme Court, which he did, though he ultimately withdrew as Debra's counsel and was replaced by a public defender. In their ruling, the Supreme Court determined that regardless of the merit of Timerman's decision, he had the power to dissolve the sentencing agreement, and his order was final. Prosecution couldn't appeal, and Debra will not have to complete the final year of her probation. She no longer have to be home between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., log her driving history, or have travel restrictions. She's allowed unsuspected contact with anyone under 18, but remains banned from contacting the victim. However, since she's still a registered sex offender, she has major restrictions on where she can live and work. The intrusion of the state into her life, while on supervision, is now over, but it continues with her obligation to register with the sheriff's office twice a year, and if she misses it, it's a felony, said criminal defense attorney Dennis DeVleman.
Her attorney, John Fitzgibbons, hasn't given up on getting Lafave off probation for good. He says they've appealed to the highest court in the state.
The Supreme Court of Florida has accepted jurisdiction of the case. We're hopeful that we will receive a favorable ruling in the next 6 months to a year from the Supreme Court. And then that should finally conclude things one way or another in this case.
Nearly 20 years later, Debra is now 43, is remarried with 3 children, including 12-year-old twins, and lives in a 5-bedroom house outside Tampa. Debra has also changed her name and tries to avoid attention but still gets recognized in Tampa Bay area.
What's the reaction you get in the street from people who recognize you?
Snickers, stares. Mothers would hold their children tightly when they saw me.
Obviously, do it in front of you?
Obviously.
People say bad things to you?
That's Debra Lafave.
In 2016, Debra cooperated with a longtime friend on a self-published book, Debra Lafave, A Crown of Beauty for Ashes, and it would be the only time she publicly addressed her crimes. In the book, Debra, now a born-again Christian, claimed to have been sexually abused as a teenager, which led to hypersexuality as an adult. The book also claimed that Debra, who suffered from bipolar disorder, was in love with her victim and has sought counseling since her arrest.